what advice would you give someone who has recently relapsed?
Okay, so for a lot of y'all that don't know, that's new to the channel, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober now for about 4 years. Actually, going about 4.5 years, going on 5 years. And so the advice I would give to anybody that is struggling with addiction, no matter what your addiction is the biggest thing you have to understand whenever you relapse is it's going to happen. It's okay. You got to forgive yourself. You got to forgive yourself and you got to pick yourself up. One of the biggest things that the enemy tries to use, like in our heads and stuff like that, is when you mess up, like, oh my God, I messed up so bad, I relapsed. And then you start punishing yourself. Well, one of the things that kept me in addiction for the longest was the fact that I was punishing myself. So I'm here to tell you that it's okay if you mess up. I have fallen whenever I was in my addiction, maybe over 100 times. I have relapsed. I had fallen and I kept getting back up. And eventually one day I got up and I stood up and I was able to stand on 2 feet. You got to forgive yourself. You got to be able to say, okay, I messed up. Okay, now how do I fix that?
Yeah.
And what did I learn from that? Instead of beating yourself up and instead of blaming yourself, because that's only going to keep you in that addiction.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I feel like that is extremely strong. Another thing too, I feel like is extremely important is the people that are around you. You have to surround yourself with people that can help get you away from it. If you continue to hang around the same people that got you into the mess that you're in anyway, you're going to continue to stay in the mess that you're in. I feel like you have to get a better vibrational type of group of people. And however that looks for you. For me, I wound up moving from one state to another state. And then I got with Shawnda, and I had to remove myself from all people, places, and things. I even changed my phone number and everything as well too. And there's no hate towards anybody. It's just I had to remove myself, forgive them, forgive myself in order to heal. One of the biggest things that kept making me relapse was the fact that I didn't properly heal. And when you haven't properly healed, it's very hard to move on. However, having said that, when you're trying to heal, you've got to be able to do it sober-minded because you can't heal while you're numbing yourself. I thought that by numbing myself that I was healing myself. Well, in all reality, I was taking steps back, and I was never getting out of a hole that I had dug myself into. So when I removed everything and I became distant from everything, I had the opportunity and the proper time to heal. And then this right here had to get right, because if this ain't right and this ain't right, then nothing that you produce or anything around you is going to be right.
That was good. I'm going to come from the advice angle of someone. I'm going to reword the question because, I mean, I don't have experience with relapsing, but I'm going to reword the question in what advice would you give a spouse or someone who has a spouse who has recently relapsed? Because I feel like I could give advice on that angle versus like the actual
like
subject.
that. Yeah.
So, the advice that I would give someone, if you are a spouse to someone who has recently relapsed, like if your spouse has relapsed, the best advice that I ever got when I was in a similar situation, this was a while ago, was be there for them in that moment. Right. But when they sober up, you have to allow them to make their own decision for themselves. Right. Because when I was in the situation, obviously I didn't know what to do. I knew that, Michael had come so far and I didn't want to see him throw his life away because I know everything that he lost when he, before he met me and like his story. Right. But I knew that I also couldn't necessarily be the person that forced him to stay on his journey if he didn't want to stay there. And so what I did was I waited until he sobered up, and then we had a conversation and I let him make the decision, because in that situation, he had went to a place where the person enabled him to fall back into his addiction. And I was like, if you want to go back there, I'm not going to stop you. But I feel that this is the safest place for you to stay on your journey. But I have to allow you to make that decision for yourself. So if you have a spouse that has relapsed, obviously it depends on the circumstance. Like if it's a consistent relapse situation, or if it's like a one, like it's been a while and then like they recently relapsed for whatever reason. Right. But allow them to make the decision, but also give them grace as their spouse. Like, don't
Right.
beat them over the head about the fact that they're relapsing, because they already are going to feel like crap that they've
Right.
done it, because of a lot of the things that Michael already addressed, like how you
Right.
feel when you're in that process and knowing, and you almost have to be stronger as the spouse to let them know, like, look, I understand, but I'm here for you, but also be stern enough to let them know that you're not going to enable that
Right.
behavior. And that, I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying.
So I kind of feel like addiction is the punishment that we give ourselves for what we feel we deserve. Is the best way for me to describe addiction. I feel like a lot of times we get into the headspace of making mistakes, and the things that have been done to us or things that we've done to other people, that kind of piles up on us. Now, I will say, like she said, being supportive. The person is already punishing themselves.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep beating them up over it. However,
Right.
having said that, I will say this too to anybody that is got a family member, loved one, spouse, whatever. They have to want to change. My sobriety would have never came if I didn't make the conscious decision that I can't keep living like this. I want something different out of life. And struggling to do that. And that's why I said, don't get me wrong, I had fallen so many times, but I still had that want to do something different. And eventually, God's grace got me out of that, and I was able to get put back. And like I said, you'll fall. Like it says in the Bible, you fall 7 times and you get up.
Yeah. Keep
You know,
going.
yeah, you keep going, and that's I feel like that's the way to successfully come out of that. And like you said, support, being supportive is extremely important. However, they do have to be held accountable
Yeah.
too.
Support, don't enable. Because
Yeah,
there's a
don't enable.
difference.
Don't enable.
I
Yeah.
also want to add, before we wrap this up too, from a spouse's perspective, try to figure out what their triggers are.
Yeah,
I
that's a
feel
good
like
one.
that's really, really big, because if you can figure out what their triggers are, you can almost catch them before they fall, right?
Yeah.
So I know, like with Michael specifically, I know that a trigger for him is like extreme stress, because that's what kind of made him, fall into
Yeah.
addiction in the first place. Extreme stress. So anytime he's experiencing extreme stress, I'm very, very cautious with our conversations in navigating, like, how he feels, what is he, kind of
Right.
entertaining at that moment. And there's even been times where Michael will be vulnerable and be like, look, I really want to do this right now. I'm not going to, but I had that thought today.
Right.
And then we talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like if you can know their triggers and know what, like if something really tragic has recently happened, and you know that normally if something tragic happens, like they tend to kind of go to that, check the pulse. Like check the emotional
Right.
pulse with them and try to find different ways. Cause if you, like, I don't drink, so I haven't had I don't drink or smoke or anything like that, where I tend to go to certain things to like kind of numb the void or whatever. But I try to allow him to learn new ways to express those feelings that don't include alcohol. And because I have a sober mind, I feel that I'm able to give him more ideas in reference to how to deal with those emotions.
Right. The thing is with anything, any kind of addiction, whether it's smoking cigarettes, whether it's alcohol, drugs, it
Yeah.
all becomes habit. And
Yeah.
so when you are wanting to get rid of one thing, then you need to introduce. I feel like it's easier if you introduce something else to it, right?
Yes.
Like, and what I
Yes.
mean by that is like working out. Well, if you know that alcohol makes you feel good, then you can replace it with, like, let's say walking. Let's say, because that releases endorphins in your brain. So uh, it's a little bit different than what you're used to, but it's a better outcome. I feel
Yeah.
like painting, drawing, walking, working out, going fishing, traveling, trying new restaurants, just doing something, introducing something new to yourself that you can kind of indulge yourself into. Because for me, I have an addictive personality. It's just who I am. I was a smoker and I was a drinker. So I went from one thing to another. So I had to figure out a more positive route of what I was wanting to kind of do. And for me, it was like exercising and cooking for my family. Cooking. was actually my
Yeah.
biggest thing, and I would have never known it, but because I went into it, now I'm like, yeah.
I
So
love that.